Brooks Running has a new shoe for you runners out there. Did you hear that? Better turn up your volume. In fact, turn it up to the max. Introducing the all-new Ghost Max. It's got all kinds of things to make your knees and ankles feel protected, like Max Cushion, Max Soft Landings with DNA Loft V2 foam, and Max Smooth Rides with their Glide Roll Rocker. Feel better on your run with Ghost Max. Learn more at brooksrunning.com.
The kettle's boiled, Vic.
Great. Perfect timing. Just a dash of milk for me, please, mate.
Here you go. Shall we get started then?
Have you ever woken up on a Sunday morning and said, I'm never drinking again, and then found yourself waving $50 at a barman by happy hour?
Are you wondering why everyone else can stop at 1 while you head to a dodgy after-party with a weird bloke called Disco Dave? If so, it might be time to take a deeper look at your relationship with your reliable social crutch, alcohol.
On each episode, we'll investigate our own dysfunctional dealings with booze and find out if it's possible to stop this deeply ingrained habit before things get too messy.
Yep, we're going to open up a shame shed of humiliating drinking stories to help you understand why waking up from a booze coma each weekend with a kebab sticking out of your top pocket might actually be negatively impacting your health.
Hamish and I are here to delve into what it's like being sober, an unwanted warts and all look into why giving up those cheeky pints or putting down those mummy wines will make you feel happier, help your anxiety and mental health, and turn you into the most sparkly, authentic version of you.
Won't that mean I become boring though, Vic?
Well, Hamish, we'll just have to wait and see. I'm Victoria Vanstone.
I'm Hamish Adams-Cairns.
And this is Sober Awkward. How are you, Hamish?
Well, I wanted to start this episode by saying my best friend was visiting this week.
Your best friend?
My best friend. My west friend.
Your bestest friend?
My bestest friendy in the whole wide world. He was visiting this weekend, and I have a sore ass. But it sounds dodgier than it needs to, that sentence.
Nothing wrong with having a sore ass after visiting a friend.
Yes. So what I'll give you some context.
Yeah.
He came up. Usually he's like a guy that you sort of party with.
Yes.
But he seems to have switched. Maybe it's just because I'm now sober.
Yeah.
It was the most active visit ever. Okay. So
Okay.
he got off a plane. He flew in from Singapore. He's Sonny's godfather. He flew in from Singapore, which is a 6-7 hour flight. And he goes, let's run a half marathon.
God.
So I was like, I've not run in 2 years. You just got off a long haul flight. But we went and did a half marathon.
Wow.
So that was quite intense. And the next morning, he's like, let's climb Mount Coolum, which is like an hour and a half climb, is it?
Yeah.
With a strap on. Oh, it's
Oh,
not,
God, it's not going well. No, with a
sunny
child strapped on. Oh, gosh, it's gone saucy already. We're not even a minute in.
No. So with Sunny strapped to my front, climb a mountain.
Yeah.
And then the next day we did a national park walk. So yeah, my legs and my bum are agony.
Oh, okay, God, I'm glad. Well, I'm glad it's nothing.
How's your bum?
My bum is okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
good,
it's
good.
lasted the weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
You didn't see my friend Waddy. If you'd seen him, maybe you'd have a sore ass.
maybe, hopefully. I'd like to meet him. No, I had a nice sober breakfast this weekend. 13 lovely women showed up. Actually, we had a guy show up who didn't
Yes.
realise, and I didn't notice because his name was Kerry, so I didn't notice that it was a male.
Sure.
And which was lovely, actually. Everyone said that it was cool that he joined us. So, yeah, we had a lovely time. I always leave with my face hurting, not my bottom hurting.
Sure.
My face hurts from laughing and smiling so much at those things because everybody is so open and lovely. It's a brilliant experience. Come to one, everybody. It's
The
fun.
fact that you call them a sober breakfast implies that some of your breakfasts aren't.
They didn't used to be, I can tell you. It was usually Bloody Marys at dawn, quite honestly. Yeah. So what are we talking about today?
Yes. Okay. So for a long time, listeners of the podcast have been writing to us asking us to do an episode on ADHD and its connection with alcohol. So the reason I wanted to release this episode now is that October is ADHD Awareness Month.
It's something we've both been keen to do, but we are going to be totally transparent and admit we don't really know how.
Yeah, there's actually lots of topics like that people write to us wanting us to cover, but we sort of don't know how to do them justice if we haven't experienced them ourselves. So we feel as if we need to recruit an expert who can sort of help guide us through and make our average podcast a really good podcast.
Yeah, true.
So we've been asked to do them on LGBTQI+ community. We've been asked to do them on the Australian Indigenous culture, the armed forces. All of those we feel as if we need a bit of help to do them justice.
And ADHD isn't something either of us, well, we don't think, have had any real experience of. I know my mate Faye Lawrence,
Yes.
She is doing a coaching course at the moment because she has recently been diagnosed with ADHD, and she really believes it is part of her alcoholism. And so she's really doing a load of research. I will share her details at the end of this podcast as well, because she's amazing. So yeah, get in touch with her. She knows more about it than we do, that's for sure.
100%. I now know 1,000% more than I knew this time last week. So before starting the research on this, my entire knowledge on ADHD before researching this week's episode was that I knew it had something to do with attention deficit. But I was like, attention deficit disorder, no, that's ADD. What is it, ADHD?
Oh, okay, right.
That was the entirety of my knowledge.
Okay.
Did you know more than that? Where are you sitting on this?
Well, not really. I get some emails sometimes from people saying that they think I have ADHD,
Yeah.
which I find really fascinating because they're not doctors. If a doctor emailed me and said, look, I'm an ADHD doctor and I think you have ADHD, then I might listen. But if it's someone I've not met before, then generally I don't listen to them. But I do have people saying that they think I might have it. And when I was researching this topic recently, I did find there was a list of symptoms, and I did find that I do have some of them, but not all of them. And I found it really interesting because I think being diagnosed with something is helpful. But for me, perhaps it just makes me more focused or more capable, and I whether getting diagnosed with something might not work for me because it might make me worry about myself and worry about my behaviour. So in fact, if I do have a bit of ADHD, then I'm wondering whether it's worth looking into it or not. So I'm hoping this episode is going to help, because I do think having a diagnosis is probably a good idea, because it would make you more empathetic towards someone that had it and make you more understanding of your own issues, if you know what I mean. But basically, I don't know very much about it at all. There are some concerns that my son Freddie has it.
Right.
His kindy teacher has mentioned it to me, and the lady that he does speech therapy with. But he's so distracted at speech therapy, Hamish, because he hates it.
Yeah.
So he's acting like a complete loon. I'm like, he's not always like this. He's just acting completely like crazy at the moment. But yeah, there are mentions of it within my family, but none of us have actually been tested for it. So that's probably not a good thing, and it's maybe something we should do. And I'm hoping today I will find out.
Well, I can tell you from this episode, you would really struggle to be diagnosed with it if you only display some of the symptoms.
Okay,
As an
right.
adult, you basically have to display all of the symptoms for them to go, you've got it.
Okay.
It's kind of something that's diagnosed a lot in children, but very difficult to actually get a diagnosis as an adult, and he will tell you why.
Okay, I'm finding it so interesting already, Hamish, because I don't know the ins and outs of it, and I do wonder, at what stage people get diagnosed, and also how much of it is just part of the human condition.
Yeah.
Like, does having ADHD make us work harder or make us do more quickly and things like that? It's very interesting. It's a fine line to whether something is helping you or hindering you.
Okay, you were in the same headspace as I am.
Okay.
On this. But what really gave me the nudge to step up and take the mantle on this episode, Vic, was two experiences that happened to me in a very short period of time. So the first one was that I met a new friend. New friend.
Oh, a new friendy, Wendy woo woo.
Best friend
Oh
in
my
the-
God! Did you hold hands in the park? Oh my God, Hamish has got a new friend.
Oh God, I don't know how to draw this in now because what I'm about to say is quite serious.
Okay, back to serious mode.
So I told him that I had a podcast about sobriety, and he was actually very open and quite brave in sharing his experiences of alcohol and ADHD. So he explained to me how common it was for those living with ADHD to either drink or smoke weed daily, particularly at the end of the day. And actually, I had no idea about that. And I know we get emails saying, do it, this is an important subject, but I really had no idea it was that big an issue and that common an issue for people struggling with ADHD. And then shortly after that, we had a message come through, I think it was on Instagram, from someone who said, not only please do an episode on ADHD, but more importantly, they were like, I'm sure you've already spoken to this person, it seems obvious, but clearly this is the perfect guest for you to get involved. And I was like, okay, that's the email we want, guys. If
Yes,
you say do an episode on the gay community, we want your number one tip of the person to speak to as well. Do
Yes.
a little bit of the work for us, I guess is what we're saying.
Yes, help us out.
So the name that they recommended was a guy called Dr. Alex Connor.
So why Alex, Hamish? Alex is an associate professor in biomedical science communication at the University of Birmingham.
He was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult and has since coached ADHD clients and published papers, blogs and newspaper articles on the subject.
Alex was awarded a National Teaching Fellowship for his work on ADHD in academia.
He's also a fellow podcaster. He co-hosts the ADHD Adults Podcast, which has reached the top 10 in the mental health category in the UK, Ireland and New Zealand.
He is the chair and co-founder of ADHD Adult UK, which is the UK's leading adult ADHD charity.
And, as you will soon find out, he does not take himself too seriously.
Oh,
which is
good.
Exactly our kind of guest.
Perfect. That's pretty impressive credentials there, Hame.
I know, that's such a long list of amazing things.
I know it is. What would our lists look like, do you think?
Oh, God.
Oversharer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sore bottoms.
You were the number one downer of snakebite in Scunthorpe
Oh,
or something, weren't you?
yes, Scunthorpe. No, Luton, just as bad.
Luton, yeah.
Number one snakebite and black downer in the sort of West London, northwest
I guess
London.
you've got that. I've got occasionally takes his clothes off for a cheap laugh.
And no game home, shit with the ladies.
Yeah, and well known throughout Luton and the rest of England as being shit with ladies. I hope we never get interviewed on Desert Island Discs.
Yes.
It would be embarrassing for the presenter, wouldn't it?
Alex won't have us on his podcast now because we've got no numbers or letters after our names. We've got nothing.
But I found out so much during our chat. So I don't want to give away too much, but I generally think there's so much to take from his experiences, whether you live with ADHD or not. So to give you a little context, before we got into this interview, it started really weirdly.
Oh, good.
Okay.
I like
so
a weirdie.
He came online telling me that he had just been to the hospital because
Right.
his wife had cut her face with some paper. I had a lot
Dear.
of questions about that. I was like,
Right.
was it a paper cut? Did she drop the yellow pages on her head? I had a lot of questions about that, but I
Yeah.
feel like that's not really what this podcast is about. So he said, I might have to run at any time. At any moment during the interview, my phone might go and I might have to run back to the hospital.
Okay.
So I was sort of on edge. And I also thought, go. We don't have to do this now.
Do it another time.
Your wife's in hospital with a cut on her face from
Yeah.
paper. You can run. But I was really grateful that he was like, no, we'll do it.
Okay.
Then we had the usual half an hour panic of, I can hear you, but I can't see you. Your mic's working, your headphones isn't
God.
working. You got a panic call. John got a panic call.
Yeah.
We eventually sort of figured it out. And I began the interview by asking him, what is ADHD?
That's actually a more difficult question to answer than it sounds. It depends who you ask and what you mean. So, from a medical perspective, as the disorder of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, it's a sort of symptoms and behaviours that are caused by a problem with how our brains develop from inside the womb, really, for mainly genetic reasons. And so we don't process information in the same way as the vast majority of adults. It's problems with what we pay attention to, choosing and for how long. It's problems with controlling our emotional reactions to things. It's problems sitting still when you're supposed to. And it's problems getting bored very, very easily. So things that everybody struggles with, but 50, 100 times a day and to quite an extreme level.
And how does that look in your life? What's your version of ADHD? Because I understand there's a few different types within that description.
There are actually three flavors of ADHD. So there's if you think about the words attention deficit, and deficit in medical land where nobody lives doesn't mean lack of, it means doesn't work properly. So it's not that we have less attention, we just don't pay attention to the things we want to or for as long as we want to. And so some people are inattention type. Some people are the hyperactivity, impulsivity type. And some people, like me, are the triple threat, they're combined type, where we have all of those things. I fidget, I guess you would say. I don't love the word because it's slightly infantile, but I am hyperkinetic. Everything moves all the time. It's almost physically painful to me to sit in an audience, for example. That's not everybody with ADHD. That's one of my reactions. I'll fiddle with my pen, my toes move, everything moves all the time. I have impulsive physical interactions, and the attention side of things is to watch a film at the cinema. I find that, and I love it. I love films. Almost impossible without getting up, going to the loo, pretending I need a wee. I struggle to maintain attention ever on anything except the odd thing which really grabs me, especially when it shouldn't, and I then hyper focus for hours to the exclusion of all else. It's really.
So are you flicking through these in the same day? Are you going one day being very hyper, the next day very hyper focused, or is it, every half hour something switching?
It's a really good question. No, I'm always like it all the time. Not every half an hour, every half minute. And different days are worse from others. And if you're not medicated, it's particularly bad. And if you haven't had support, so talking therapies, that kind of thing, you don't learn the strategies that are healthy for you. But yeah, it's all the time. That's kind of the point, really. Because everybody gets bored, don't they? Sometimes everybody wants to sit in an audience or in a meeting for 3 hours. No one. But if it's 2 minutes and you're already sort of like, oh, well, this is painful, always, all the time. Imagine what school was like for me, because school in the UK system, as you know, is listening, sitting there listening. Unbelievably torturous for me.
And it's one size fits all. It's sort of, this is the way that we teach, and you better fit in the box, otherwise you're going to struggle.
Or you're going to get labelled, which I've been labelled all my life.
And to particularly focus on that example you gave of being in a cinema, when you're getting that urge to, I need to get up and pretend to go to the loo or just go for a walk, what are you actually feeling? Are you feeling bored? Are you feeling like I need to move? I need to be looking at something that's not just this dark room with a screen in front of me? What are you actually feeling in that moment?
Yes. So all of the above. It's almost like physical pain. There's nothing else. So imagine your brain saying, this is the wrong thing to do. You're doing the wrong thing. This is the wrong thing. You're doing the wrong thing. As well as being bored is sort of another horrible word, isn't it? Because it sort of suggests. I remember someone saying to me when I was a kid, "Oh, only boring people get bored," and I was, "Oh God, yeah, of course. That's a character flaw. I'm a bad human." But what it actually is a brain disorder where motivation for somebody with ADHD much more requires our brains, not even us, our brains to see the short-term emotional reward of doing it. I think everyone can relate to the idea that you've got a job to do in the kitchen, say there's towels on the floor, you should pick them up and stick them in the washing machine. You've got to feel a reason to do that. You've got to feel an emotional reward to actually move your legs and arms over there. And for ADHD, that threshold is much higher. And so everybody sometimes doesn't want to. So I'll leave that till later. But with us, that's all the time. If we can't always see a very clear emotional reward for doing it, short term as well, not like, oh, I'll have clean towels in 3 days. We can't do it. Not don't want to. We want to do it more than anybody. With the shame and the guilt of this is huge. We physically can't connect the part of the brain that plans to do it and the kind of ancient lizard part of the brain that does stuff, moves. The communication between those parts of the brain doesn't work properly.
Yeah. We'll come back to that phrase shame and guilt, because that's obviously something that comes up a lot when people talk about addiction and drinking in particular. But you've mentioned the word fidgeting, you've mentioned school. Yeah. ADHD, many of us obviously think this is a childhood condition. Yes, and I've heard you talk about how it's very difficult to actually get diagnosed as an adult. And I thought, gosh, how many people suffer with ADHD? I would have guessed 1 in 1,000. And it's actually 2.5% of adults
1 in 40.
who are living with it. Isn't that extraordinary? And even your own diagnosis was by accident. Well, tell me about that day.
We sort of discussed. I'd got little babies, and that isn't a great time, is it, in your life? It's always, I don't know if you know this, but it's. I would argue that 0 to 2.25 for people who have substance problems is such a danger sign that we need support more than anybody could possibly imagine. It's horrible. Obviously, I broadly tolerate my own children. I went along to get help, and this is embarrassing, Hamish. I had already published papers as a professional scientist in ADHD and other neurodivergent conditions. I didn't know I had it because the behaviours and the way the medical textbooks describe the symptoms aren't really very similar at all. And then luckily I had a friend who was a psychiatrist who said, this might be that. So I went to the GP and I said, look, I've got my drinking, I can't, it's out of control. Someone suggested ADHD, and then I said these words, which I'm not even sure is a real thing in adults. I'm not sure I believe it. It's just personality. I said all this stuff, all these proper, bigoted, biased things that I now spend half of my life trying to gently clarify. And he said, oh, no, you definitely are. It's obvious. I'll send you directly to the psychiatrist, which tells you when it was and how bad I am. And they were great. They were great. They explained it to me. They explained that in reality, nobody actually gets cured of ADHD. There is no cure. It's lifelong. You're always going to have these things. If you manage your life to a point where you're not unhappy, it's not negatively affecting your choices, then you might not qualify for a medical diagnosis because they have to look at the effect on you. Which is why in the literature it looks like you've cured yourself, when in actual fact you've had privilege. In my case, for example, I've had loads of life privilege. You've had support, you've had luck, and you've been a creative person who can find ways around it. In my case, pretending I wasn't using drugs and alcohol was how I demonstrated success.
And when they diagnosed you with it, was there an element of relief? Was there an element of, that's what it's been all this time? Or did it, go, well, that doesn't solve my problem. I'm still feeling what I'm feeling. I'm still feeling as if I need to drink. What were your emotions in being told the news?
I have that now, that feeling now of relief. And I love having a reason for some of the labels I've always put on myself. But at the time, my self-image was so low that I thought I tricked the psychiatrist. I thought I would remain just a shit person, and this was too much of an excuse, too convenient for it not to be just simply my fault. This was 30 odd years of saying I'm not a real boy, which is my slightly creepy way of saying I never felt like a proper human. I can't do the simple things everyone can do, and I've got a PhD, and then I can't join my wife in a trip to the theatre or something. Really? What a pathetic man-child. And so to go against that required years of deconstruction, I think.
It sounds to me like there is a sort of inner dialogue that you've got this lack of self-worth, probably being boxed and given a tough time at school and, being labelled. And on the other hand, you've got, well, I've got a PhD. For someone who struggles with attention and school was difficult, you've obviously excelled in you're clearly a very, very intellectual man. Is there a sort of inner conflict of labels and not being able to know exactly what you are coming together here?
There was, not anymore. What I didn't realise until a long ages really was the difference between external and internal success. So my external success is that everybody lauded. They used to call me I can't even, like they would it's like the golden boy and all these things. And the height of my external success was about the time I tried to kill myself. And that's the point, isn't it? Not my PhD means, and I can't stress this enough, nothing to me. Because I'm not proud of it, because it wasn't the real me doing it. I was masking, I was hiding. I was doing it for the reasons that were a cost to my mental and physical health. But let's have a think about this, my podcast, which I love, my coaching qualification, which really coaching isn't anything. It's broadly a piece of paper with some open questions on it. That's all my job is. That means more to me than 1,000 PhDs because it's the real me doing it. And I get internal success from people saying, oh, you've helped me stop drinking, or you've helped me with my ADHD, or just accept myself. That's success, Hamish. That's it. That's all.
So what was the driving force behind you pursuing the PhD?
To be Dr. Connor, to win. I thought that was the key. Then I could be like everyone else. I wanted to be someone that could go to garden centres. Oh, the thought, I couldn't wait to be a grown-up. Still waiting. And so pretending to be something I'm not is what I've always done. I've always masked. When I'm with my community, with the adult ADHD community, which I spend a lot of time with now, we code switch. We have a dialect that people might not comprehend. So if I said to you, oh, well, obviously I climbed up that mountain in record time, but I can't do the ironing. Someone with ADHD would not say, why not? They wouldn't say, but you've done the ironing before. They would just go, oh yeah, obviously. So becoming safe, becoming unmasked was a massively long process.
Did you not know anyone else with ADHD growing up, or until you were diagnosed, and then I imagine you sort of discover this there's bound to be a community of people with ADHD who are sharing these types of experience. Were you lonely the day that you found out? Were the only one that you knew effectively?
Yeah, lonely, ashamed. I hid it from my employers. I hid it from my family, because it's that heady mix of not even believing it's real because I can't possibly have a reason for my behaviours, waiting for the frankly accurate expectation that people will go, oh, that's just naughty boys. That's just an excuse. That's just, everyone needs something. Now, why do you need a label? And that's just my mum. That's not true. That's a joke. She's really supportive. But everybody does it. Everybody says it to me all the time. They say, oh, I'm like that. They've no idea. And so, yeah, incredibly lonely. There was no support mechanism for people that didn't want esoteric, crystal-based bullshit. So we built one.
What I'm interested in with regards to alcohol and ADHD is to what extent it's the ADHD itself that is drawing you to drink. It is the internal dialogue in your mind or in that side of things, or if it's the other side and it's the guilt, it's the shame, it's the loneliness, it's the label, it's the worried about judgment. Or is it, as simple as, well, it's a little bit of both, and that's why it's so difficult to fight?
I'm going to say something that's not science. This is more of a scientific opinion. I think it's more the first than the second. And you're right, of course, it's a little bit of both. And some people have chemical alcohol addiction. One of the reasons I don't call myself an alcoholic, and rather I say I have an alcohol use disorder, is because I'm not chemically addicted to alcohol. I use alcohol to self-medicate for a neurological disorder. And the main symptom of that is one called domestic anxiety, and this is a massive plug for the podcast. I invented that term to describe a thing that isn't out there. And that means you get home, right, from work, you've had a successful day, you're just about to open the door, you love your family, and you feel sick. What are you going to do? What's the plan? I can't enjoy myself, possibly. I don't know what to do for the next 5 hours. The thought of just watching Coronation Street or whatever, oh no. So where's the emotional reward? And the thought of I need some kind of like checklist, do I, to spend time with my lovely wife and kids, or to play the piano or read a book? That can't be right, but it is. And so that domestic anxiety, that feeling, a very, very, very easy shortcut for that is, in my experience, cocaine and alcohol. My psychiatrist, one of the first things he said to me was, you know how you stockpile cocaine from parties and then save it for when you're on your own? Because I was a single dad. And you use that to do the Sunday Times crossword on your own for a bit of peace. That's not how the other people are using it. And this was news to me. Just to quieten the bloody mind a bit.
It's interesting. One of the reasons that I wanted to record this podcast now is that literally 2 weeks ago, I made a new friend up here who the first night that I met him told me about he's living with ADHD and he has to drink, similarly to the way you described, between 5 and 7 p.m. every night he has to drink. And I saw him at the weekend and I said, one of the things that Alex talks about is domestic anxiety. And he went, oh yeah, even though this is something that you have created, he totally got it. And I'm not really dug into why he feels like he has to have a drink at that time, whether or not it is a reward, whether or not it's just quietening all of the noise in his mind at that time of night. He's also talked about people needing to drink just to sort of function during the day, to not feel lost for words and to feel, not socially as if a bright light is shining on you. I know that your podcast co-host talked about smoking weed, which again, this guy was like, yeah, I'm either smoking weed or I'm drinking alcohol, depending on the night. I know that you two seem like one of you does one and the other does the other, but I was shocked by some of the stats that you named in your podcast. 43% of those living with ADHD will have a lifetime prevalence of alcohol misuse versus just 3 to 11% of those living without it.
I think that more than half of people with an addiction And if I'm really honest, I think it's like 80% have underlying ADHD or ADHD traits that are the cause of their addiction. I don't think all people with an addiction have ADHD, but I think it's incredibly high.
What were you doing before you discovered drugs and alcohol at that time of night when domestic anxiety seems to hit? Or did it only hit when you had a family and kids? You know, is it not so prevalent when you're 12 years old or 15 years old?
I was drinking from 14. So that, and before then, I was fucking miserable. Can I swear on your show?
Yeah, you go for it.
I was really sad. I wasn't one of those naughty boys. I have a more feminine type of ADHD, which is how they... So it's never true that all women do this and all men do this. And having said that, you're far more likely to get a diagnosis if you're a boy, for lots of reasons, even though the prevalence is probably equivalent. And one of them is the way culturally we are expected to behave. And the manifestation, therefore, of childhood ADHD tends, population-wise, to be different. And I would have fit more into the female expectation in that I wasn't playing up. I was just sad the whole time. And then I got home and I had a brilliant family, still have. And it was an ADHD friendly, it was wildness, brilliant, loving wildness, still is. And so I had that, and that was for me. I lived in the middle of nowhere in the 80s and 90s, and I had guns and motorbikes and just fun all the time. I didn't do homework ever. Wouldn't have even crossed my mind. So that was my comfort zone.
Does that drink at that time of night, 5 to 7 p.m, make the idea of hanging out with the wife and kids more pleasing, more tolerable? Are you just sort of sedating your emotions? What are you actually getting out of that drink at that time?
Yeah, so it's not the actual actions. So I'm sober now, and I love doing that, but I don't love the thought of 4 hours. I do like the action of 4 hours. So it's all about anticipation and perception, and the fear that you're going to get bored. So what it does, so alcohol is, it's both a depressant and a stimulant in equal measure. No one knows how it works. So speaking as a neuroscientist, which I'm a crap neuroscientist, but we don't actually know how it works completely because it crosses the cells without going through a receptor, partly. We know that it triggers a lot of the things that are expected to be reduced in ADHD, such as how dopamine works, dopamine activity, serotonin, which is, the Prozac one, and noradrenaline, which is excitement and reward and gambling and all those things. And we know that alcohol affects those. So what I was doing was quietening the sort of constant noise in my head, but also a depressant and a cognitive depressant. So I wasn't able to think as well. So it really just slowed everything down.
The difficulty in hearing you describe it in the podcast episode that you did, which was, I think it was October last year, you'd just done 9 months of sobriety, but I think you were back to drinking.
Yeah.
And it sounded like you were saying that the difficulty is how bad it is for you, but it's actually working. Like, to do the job that you've asked of it to do at that time of night, and you had been using it since you were 14, it was working. So you're sort of in this horrible position where it's obviously doing you no good, but it's a short-term fix.
Yeah, I mean, people wouldn't do it if it wasn't pleasurable, would they? I remember when Train Spotting came out and people said, you can't say heroin's nice. And I was thinking, well, why do you think they do it? It's nice. I think if you can have one drink and stop, there's no healthy, is there? There's only some things are healthier than others. And for me, it did a big amount of the work that I now have to do, and all the things I have in place that have replaced alcohol and are healthier, they all stop working. So I have to have them on rotation, whereas alcohol never did stop working. It's much harder.
So what tools are you using? How have you gone about giving up?
It's a really, really personal decision. One thing I'll say, and this isn't true for all ADHD people, but be really, really mindful that our brains process things differently. So one of the reasons I couldn't give up, and I guarantee, Hamish, I've never said this before, I will never drink again. I'm not day by day, because that's what I was always trying before. I was trying to be Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm not religious either, so it was an absolute nightmare. And I know that loads of people respect it highly, and I do. But remember, we're different. So if it doesn't work for you, it's not shame. I need routine, and I hate routine because of ADHD. So if I say, "Oh, I'll take one day," I'm impulsive by nature. Well, tomorrow I'm definitely going to drink then, right? If I say, "Oh, I don't do that," that's a fact. I kind of don't think about it until domestic anxiety kicks in, and then I know I've got a series of things in place. And that's a personal thing. What I would say is get some help, ask someone, just run with you. It can just be a friend. You don't need professional help to ask you what things make you feel reward and write them down because you'll forget. And they'll stop working. Don't get ashamed of that. Don't get put off by that. Just have as many as you can. It might be Sudoku or chess or anything else. And so exercise works really, really well for me, but then at 5 o'clock, I'm not in the mood to do it, so I have to do something else. Talking, I have a friend who I can phone. What works? So TV programs that I have to say to the missus, I'm going to watch this on my own now because no one else wants to watch it, and I need to not drink right now. Eating at 5:30. Don't eat late if you're like me, because hunger and alcohol are brilliant friends. So I have loads and loads of things that are all on rotation. They all stop working. I don't feel shame about that, whereas I used to. You think you have to be someone else. And it is a little bit of work and eternal vigilance, price of freedom and all that.
And have you found those just over a lifetime of trial and error? Just little tricks that seem to work until they don't?
Yeah, but they don't come in by osmosis. I had to actually think about it. And then I had to actually write it down because I don't remember things. Someone asks someone with ADHD, "Oh, what are your strengths?" Will go, "I have none." Or they'll look at something on their shelf and go, "Book?"
Yeah.
Lamp? What? What was the question? So all these things, it's okay to get help to write them down. And and then thinking of when was I happy? A question no one ever asked me. No one has ever asked me this, and now I ask a lot of people who ask me for help is, what's it like when you don't drink? How does that feel? Why can't you not? And part of it's impulsive, it's available. And that was a big thing for me is when you spend all day in a hairdresser's, sooner or later, you're going to get a haircut. So if you've got available, I don't go into pubs just because it's available. I've actually recently gone in a couple of times for food and it was absolutely fine. But for the first probably 6 months, I wouldn't step foot in one.
How long have you been sober now?
This time approximately, it's 12 hours under 8 months. So I had a moment on New Year's Eve last year where, I'm not sure I've talked about this before. Okay. I was pissed. It was 7 p.m. and my sons were visiting and my wife was there and I was having a slight sort of argument with my wife who doesn't really drink very much. And I was thinking, why is she being weird? I was saying she's purposefully not understanding and she's purposefully being argumentative. And I said it out loud. And both of my sons said, "It's not her, it's you." And I thought, firstly, that's your stepmother. You need to support me first. That is a joke. I didn't say that at all. What I did think was that cannot be true. So I had this moment of cognitive dissonance where all three of them were saying, and I trust them all, the same thing independently. And I'm saying the opposite. And I either believe me or I believe them. And if I believe them, then I cannot trust my brain, my thoughts. I'm wrong. And the shame and the guilt. And then I carried on getting pissed and I missed the fireworks. And they all had a great time. And I don't think I've ever felt lower. So I woke up and my sons put because I asked them to, all the alcohol down, hid it away. And they said that was it. That was it. Because
it's amazing how New Year's Eve is either the biggest piss up or one of the biggest days that people give up alcohol of the year.
Yeah,
I'm sure so many people's counters start January 1st, like yours has.
It's convenient as well.
I had a shit. It feels nice at the start of the calendar, but a lot of people have shit New Year's and have falling out with a family member, and that seems to be the Kickstarter for long-lasting sobriety.
They even left the room because it got a bit awkward. And I'm thinking, really? Really? That's who you are? You're someone that people leave the room because you're making them feel uncomfortable. Really? Is that the hero of your book? Is it? I'm not having that. I'm not having that.
Depression is 3 times more prevalent in adults with ADHD.
Yeah.
And I also learned recently about the rejection sensitive dysphoria, which seems to affect so many people with ADHD.
Almost all of us.
Almost everyone, isn't it? Yeah. So I guess more so with the depression than the rejection, a huge amount of medication must be available. I'm sure there's medication available for ADHD as well. What in your experience? Yeah, is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
What in your experience has been? Yeah. What are the benefits or the cons of medicating? If it's speed, what are the pros and cons of speed in a medical environment?
So just a couple of boring science bits. Firstly, depression and anxiety are definitely more prevalent in people with ADHD. They split into 2 camps. One of whom it's just comorbid. It's like you're more likely to also have that disorder. But in some people, like me, the anxiety and the depression was entirely due to living with undiagnosed, untreated, and unsupported ADHD. So if you have the disability and the disorder of depression, and you treat ADHD, it's likely that that's not going to help the depression. You need separate CBT or whatever, or medication for that. If, like me, it's directly because I started taking medicine and getting support. One of the side effects was anxiety, and it made my anxiety go away.
Really?
Partly because all of that was due to the ADHD rather than a separate disorder, and you can have both. Also, it's possible that people with ADHD have paradoxical pharmacology. So when I'm taking cocaine to relax, I take prescription speed from my neurologist every morning at 8 a.m. It helps me sleep. I mean, just think about that for a minute. If you want to think that ADHD isn't real, it's not biological, it helps me sleep. Oh, nice, comfy speed. What the hell?
And cocaine to relax.
Yeah. Isn't that bonkers?
So if you gave 100 people in a room speed and 50 of them fall asleep, they're the 50 with ADHD.
Well, it doesn't unfortunately work like that. And 20% of people with ADHD are non-responders to the stimulant medication. There's a speed light one called Ritalin you've probably heard of, but I'm on the superpowered actual speed, lisdexamfetamine. 20% responsive. I'm not. I'm really lucky in the 80% that's very responsive, and it works very well for some aspects of ADHD, not the emotional side of things, which actually most of us struggle with. For that, you need coping strategies, support, therapy, and emotional acceptance.
It's as simple as that. They'll just go, hey, you're non-responsive. These meds are not going to be for you. We need to look at other avenues.
There are some other meds. There's some non-stimulant ones like atomoxetine. There's some off-counter options you can have. The antidepressants have been shown. Caffeine in some people seems to work in relatively high doses, like 3 or 4 cups a day. But it really is only for being able to maintain focus for longer on things you do actually want to do. It doesn't suddenly turn you into a robot zombie that wants to do accountancy unless you already love accountancy. The RSD, the rejection sensitivity you talked about, that's the emotional side of ADHD, which arguably is worse. And for me, the drinking was a big part of that. Feeling like not just that you're going to be rejected, that you expect to be, even if that's not likely, or you perceive rejection coming, or you feel rejection much more harshly than other people would. Think about getting a slap. A rejection's like a slap, right? Not very nice, no one likes it, but imagine if you've now got sunburn, and that's what ADHD feels like when you're rejected. It's emotional sunburn. And so that often you either become a people pleaser or, like me, a sociopath, where you do not allow rejection. And that comes with privilege as well, of course.
So if you were to have a magic wand and there was any one symptom of ADHD you could miraculously get rid of, would it be the rejection?
I think it would be the domestic anxiety because of the gambling, the games addiction, the alcohol, obviously the drugs. I think that, but we also have emotional dysregulation. So I once was really, really upset, cried. I was angry at my grandfather's funeral. And then another occasion when my now ex-wife made me some potatoes wrongly, I lost I had no reaction at all to that. And that was a joke. What actually happened was the opposite of those two things.
Yeah.
When my beloved granddad died, I didn't feel the right inverted commas emotions. And then the potato thing really happened. I don't respond appropriately, and I mean that. I'm not talking about what society wants. I'm talking about what I want. My emotions aren't concomitant with the stimulus, and this seems to be neurological. I'm great in a crisis because I don't give a shit. But a really tiny thing goes wrong, and then I really, really do. And in that moment, I think the world is going to fall down. And I've learned to say, I'm having an inappropriate emotional reaction. I'm going to take 3 minutes, and I go away, and I come back, and I'm like, oh no, I don't care about that thing now. No, I don't want a divorce. That was a different person speaking. And obviously, in those circumstances, with the guilt and the shame and those feelings, alcohol is a neural depressant, which is another thing that can stop those feelings. And all feelings, so it's not great.
Do you think you've got to a stage with it now where you are grateful that you have ADHD for whatever lessons you've learned and where it's taken you in your life with regards to your career and the people you speak to? Or would you still rather not have it?
No, it can fuck off.
Yeah.
It's not me. You're not more creative if you've got ADHD. That's the myth. It's nonsense. People that say that have misunderstood how it works. Creativity is a human trait. That's what we are. We're often in less rigid environments because we can't do those things. And the people you see who've got a diagnosis and say, oh, we're more creative, look at us all. We're all diagnosed and we're all creative. Yeah, if you're not very creative, how are you going to get through all those structural barriers to get the diagnosis in the first place? I've said this before. If you made a ADHD clinic at the top of a mountain, you'd be walking around going, isn't it funny that everybody with ADHD is an accomplished mountain climber as well?
Exactly.
It must be connected somehow. They make you fill in all these forms. And so if you're not someone with privilege, with support, with help, you're not going to be able to do them and you'll never get support. And that's why untreated, undiagnosed people are far more likely to commit suicide, to die earlier, to have depression, anxiety, and to have jobs and qualifications that are not in line with their intellectual abilities. So no, it's not. ADHD isn't me. I'm Alex. It's a neurological disorder that means I have to think different ways to achieve things. And having learned how to do that with support and privilege in my life, but so the freedom to go, well, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna take my time. I'm gonna learn a way that works for my brain is an advantage, but you've got to be in a really lucky position to exploit that in your life.
Alex, where can people find you? You've got your podcast. Give that a plug. All you like. Where else can we hear more of you?
That's the ADHD Adults. You can find that on Spotify. It's free with adverts. We have what's it called when you do things and people like join in for a month? It's a subscription service if people want nonsense, like extra nonsense, which they sometimes do. I do talks for Seed Talks. If you Google that, we do online ones as well if you're not in the UK. James and I do them independently and sometimes together. Get in touch if you we run a charity as well independently of that called ADHD Adult UK. It's not for people in the UK. It's from a UK cultural perspective. That's a euphemism for, you know how like the American ones are very, very positive.
Yeah.
We're sometimes slightly less positive. So are you guys pumped to have ADHD? Not really, no.
No, we hate it.
We want evidence. Yeah, and so we take the position. There are advantages of having supported, managed, treated, living with ADHD because you've had to think differently. But it's in the same way that there are advantages being in a wheelchair, that you've got muscly arms. It's not necessarily because of the disability, right? It's a coping strategy you've had to. And so, yes, we want representation because we've got something to offer that we've learned. It's more Batman than Superman, is what I'm saying. We're not special. We've had to grow up like that. And so get in touch on the socials for ADHD Adult UK if you need support from the charity perspective. If you want to talk to us, I'm Alex, the Psychoeducation Monkey on Instagram. Please get in touch. Or through you've got my email. If anybody wants to talk, send them, drop in my email.
Well, thank you so much. I can't tell you how many people reach out to us and say, you have to do an episode on ADHD. And we've always felt incapable. Like neither of us live with it. We don't know how we would approach it. And then your name was sent to us by 2 separate people in a week. And they said, look, he's funny. He's got a podcast. He lives with it. He's very intelligent. He's good at speaking about it. You were the unicorn that we were looking for to do this episode. Yeah, exactly. She emails us every week. Please get him on. But yeah, we're so grateful that we found you, because I've got no doubt that this will hopefully help lots of people who are living with ADHD and are struggling with an addiction of any sort. You know, it could be alcohol, could be any kind of drug by the sounds of it. So we'll try and talk more about the spectrum. Not at all. Thank you.
So there you have it, Hame's chat with Dr. Alex Connor.
I said it there, but I really do believe it. I think he was the perfect guest for Sober Awkward, on this episode in particular. He lives with ADHD, coaches people with it. I think I can call him an expert on the subject. And he was really open about his struggles with alcohol and drugs. Plus, he's sober. I actually didn't know he was sober going into this episode.
Right.
I knew that he had periods of sobriety.
Yeah.
It didn't really matter if he was sober, I suppose, for the subject matter, but it was certainly a bonus that he's managed to find a way to get there.
Well, it just proves, I guess, he's an expert on it, so he knows that alcohol is not going to help his ADHD at the end of the day, isn't he? What do you feel that you've learnt from this chat, Hamish? Anything at all?
No, nothing.
No,
The biggest thing for me, it was a deeper understanding and acceptance of people who live with alcohol use disorder. I think it's all well and good us saying on the podcast, you should give up, we've given up, our life's much better, you know, here are some tools to help you. But I guess actually speaking to someone who's got a condition like ADHD, but it's not as black and white as perhaps it has been for us. Mm-hmm. You know, it's so complex, and I think it's given me more empathy for people that struggle with alcohol at any stage, when you've got ADHD or not. But it really deepened my understanding of that. So I feel as if my understanding on alcohol and its effect on people just went through the roof.
Yeah, that's so good. Another thing I loved about the chat with Alex was his constant work on discovering new ways to maintain his sobriety. I mean, he doesn't relax into it, does he? He's always exploring things that work until they don't, I guess. I'm sure our listeners can relate to this and find inspiration in there too. Basically, he's just saying, keep trying.
I really hope whether you're living with ADHD or not, you've learned something from our chat today. Whether it helps you with your sobriety or furthers your understanding of the millions that are living with ADHD. We covered so much here, from bullying to labels, depression, anxiety, medication. I'm just really glad we got linked up with Alex, and would encourage all of you to go check out his ADHD Adults Podcast, which is hilarious. He's got an episode specifically on alcohol, and find him online. He's more than happy for you to email him and reach out. If you're living with ADHD or you've got a close friend or loved one who's living with it, then he is a fountain of knowledge that you can pick his brains. You know, if there's anything that I didn't cover in that interview, then please do reach out. He was just a wonderful man.
Yeah, he was brilliant. Thank you so much, Alex, for coming on Sober Awkward. We love having an expert on, don't we, Hame?
We need one expert, because we are not experts on anything.
Yeah, we're just experts at what? I don't know. What are you an expert at?
Oh, I know.
Having a sore bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about it.
That's about it.
Yeah, me too.
And we hope your wife's face is recovered.
Yeah, we hope your wife's face is recovered.
Yeah.
What, did you find out more about that?
No, I have so many questions.
Alex, you've got to tell us what happened with the paper cut.
I know.
What sort of paper are we talking about here?
I don't know.
In the face?
In the face.
Well, we'll update you on that, because that is quite interesting.
I bet I shouldn't have said that at the start. People are probably worried about that the whole episode and couldn't concentrate on the
Tell
content.
us about the face.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we will put all his links into the show notes and the face paper cut update.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you're questioning your relationship with booze, you're struggling to moderate, or your hangovers are causing anxiety, it might be time to reach out for some support.
Yeah, just talk to a mate about how you're feeling, contact a local doctor, find an AA or sobriety group. Vic's got one.
Yeah, just head to www.cuppa.community.
Remember, if you're questioning yourself, it might be time to seek support.
Even though this journey can be awkward, it is definitely worth it. And if you've enjoyed the Sober Awkward podcast, don't forget to review it, rate it, and share it with your mates.
Do they have to share it with their mates?
Yeah, of course they do. I'm not doing this for nothing, Hamish. Bloody hell.
How do they share it?